everyone. Hello, Yowza team. We sorted out our technical glitches. We are live. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate chance to sit down and have a chat with everyone. I know we've lost a bit of time, so I guess we'll just jump right in and have some fun. Have a nice little chat. So first, before we get started, I'd like just go around and have everyone introduce yourselves and let us know what your role is at Yowza, what you do for Yowza-Animation. Starting with, I'll go from whoever's next to me, starting with Robin, then moving along.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Herman, and I studied illustration, and I've been working in the animation industry for about 8 years now. And on Nature Cat, I worked primarily on the upcoming season 4 and 5 specials. And I started out on location design on Nature Cat, actually, and then I've moved into layout supervision.
Nice. Congratulations.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julian Raigoza. And here at Yowza, I've been working it's quite a bit. I kind of done a little bit. I moved around between most of the departments, where I was actually a painter in season 1 of Nature Cat. And in the last season, I was the assistant director. And now I'm currently working as an art director for another project here at Yowza.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lisa Whittick. I was the director for Nature Cat seasons 4 and 5. And before that, I was a storyboard artist on seasons 1 through 3 of Nature Cat. So I know the show really, really well. And yeah, it's been a fun ride and kind of sad to see it end, but, but it's good. Yeah, it was good. It was a great show.
That's awesome.
Hi, my name is Stephen Kane. I was the supervising animator for seasons 4 and 5 of Nature Cat. I've been animating for quite about 20 years and have been primarily just doing supervising over probably the last 5 years. And I had a great experience working with all these guys and everyone else on Nature Cat.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Vesna Mostovac, and I'm the studio art director at Yowza. I was art directing on Nature Cat, which meant overseeing the look of the show and keeping it true to what Nature Cat is. And right now I'm currently art directing a new show.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you for the introductions, everyone. We got quite the talented team here. So now, next question. This one's going to be kind of generally for whoever wants to jump in. So just curious as to how Nature Cat was pitched. Like, what did the early meetings between Spiffy and Yowza-Animation look like in the initial stages, the pitching stage? I don't know.
Well, so because seasons 1 through 3 were actually produced at another studio, we had to figure at Yowza, we had to kind of figure out what the style was because it had already been established and stay true to that style. So we weren't, going to confuse the audience by giving it a whole new look or anything. But Spiffy was very excited to push the animation further into more extreme posing and that type of. They were just open to more fun animation, quirky animation. They were also open to, I don't know, for people who have never seen the show before, Nature Cat's whole group, they're very self-aware. So they know they're in a cartoon. They talk about it sometimes. And we have a lot more of that play out in seasons 4 and 5 because it's a fun little quirk to have in the show. So I would say there was a lot of talk that way, but they're great clients. They're super collaborative. They love our feedback and we love theirs. So yeah, Stephen, what do you think about the animation of like the difference in animation? It was.
Yeah, so we took on the challenge of trying to make the show look a lot more like an older style of cartoon, like a Looney Tunes.
Okay.
And so the way we went about doing that was we put everything on twos and we really animated strong posing. We really concentrated on very strong posing. And the client really loves the way the characters look. They love the design. So we tried to keep the characters in 3/4 as much as we could, keeping them true to their design, but then pushing the posing so that it was really zippy and fun. And I mean, if anyone did anything that reminded me of something I'd see on Looney Tunes, it was like, do that. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. And with that newfound kind of the more extreme posing thing, did you find that kind of allowed you to express yourselves a bit more while working on it, or with the more extreme poses, kind of that meta with the breaking the fourth wall and all that? Was that something that was a talent to work with, or was that something that you all had to embrace and jump right into?
Well, personally, I think it was like when I was dealing with the animatics mostly before it got to Steven, and it was freeing to be able to do some of that fun stuff that not all kids cartoons are open to that. Like the younger kids, they kind of like to keep it a little bit flatter, a little bit slower. Nature Cat is a preschool show, but it seems to just push it. So it's a lot more entertaining for anyone watching it.
Yeah, the acting is excellent.
Yeah, it was
the
really
character acting is great. Some really good performances.
We had just the most amazing, talented voice actors to work from, and that was huge. They really did such a great job, and that's so important for animation because you get your storyboards, you want to follow what's happening there. But when you have these amazing actors doing such a good job, you can then push your animation even farther. You really find the comedy and the little subtleties that they were doing. My favorite character, I think, in the show was Squeaks.
That was my favorite too.
Yeah. The entire voice cast was casted by Saturday Night Live alumni, right? So Squeaks was voice acted by Kate McKinnon. We had Bobby Moynihan as Hal, and Kate McCucci was Daisy, and Karen Killam was Nature Cat. So yeah,
awesome. All-star cast as well. That's
great.
Amazing.
Yeah, and Spiffy really encouraged them to go off script and do improv if they wanted, and I think that also gave a little bit of extra fun to the animators to be able to be a little bit more creative with their animating, right? So.
I bet I was actually going to ask how did that kind of that freestyling of the actors, how did that affect the animation, or did it, or was it something you had to account for in the animation process?
Well, definitely we had to account for it. There was times when we had to really cut a lot of great improv just because of time. Like we had to get it down to to time, but I think just being able to maybe save those little bits of improv and maybe cut some of the more generic stuff in the script was what we always strive to do.
Right. Very cool. That's a perfect segue into the next question. Thank you for bringing up the actor, Steve. So the next question is, so the series follows the adventures of your four main characters, Nature Cat, Hal the dog, Squeaks the mouse, and Daisy the bunny. For those in the audience who are not familiar with Nature Cat, how would you describe the series and characters if you had to, your elevator pitch, so to speak?
Does anybody else want to go, or
take a stab at this one?
No, okay. So Nature Cat, it's basically, the premise is that it's a show that's supposed to encourage kids to get outside in their own backyard and follow animals that they would see in a neighborhood or in their neighborhood: cats, dogs, mice, rabbits, and these characters, they will usually find either an animal with a problem or they want to learn about something in nature, but it's not usually. There were some episodes where they would travel further and go to see like a volcano or something, but the bulk of the show is all nature learning in your environment within a small city or a little bit of country or something like that. But it's
gotcha.
yeah, it's kind of real life learning for kids.
and the characters are each of the characters, you know how quite often in shows each character is kind of an archetype, a specific type. Is that hold true of Nature Cat as well, or are there defined personalities for each of your characters? And if so, how would you describe briefly each character?
Well, Squeaks is sarcastic.
Squeaks likes to close out some scenes with some good one-liners.
Yes.
Love a good one in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we've got Squeaks is definitely I think she was everyone's favorite because Kate McKinnon did such an awesome job improving her. So she was sarcastic and just kind of, I don't know, just like our comedy of the show. Yeah, I would say Nature Cat, he's kind of like he's our hero. He's so enthusiastic. He wants to go do these things, but he's also a big chicken. If anything comes up, he's like the first to run away or get scared or whatever. So he's kind of always the one that initiates the adventure. Daisy is the brains of the operation. She's got her little smartphone. She checks information. She, will teach the others about certain things in nature. And she's very, very smart. And Hal is the genius, even though he comes off as not knowing anything. He comes off kind of silly,
happy-go-lucky,
goofy, yeah. And he acts. He doesn't act like he doesn't know. He doesn't really know these things, but he always seems to trip upon the answer and ends up being the one who is the genius.
I see. Very cool. And this is just a question I like to ask, but for the animals, I know a lot of times animators use kind of their own animals they've come across or anything that for inspiration. Was that anything that, or were these pre-existing characters that you just ran with?
Well, I think generally we animated them most of the time standing up on two legs, acting more like humans than really like a dog or a cat. But there were definitely times, there's like if Nature Cat got scared, he would jump up, his tail would go out like in a cat, because we would put those in at subtle moments when we could. Yeah.
We actually had a really interesting challenge in Nature Cat because our four main characters were obviously, cartoon animals. They would stand on their feet and do all these things, and but because it's a nature show and it's educational, we had to, at some points, they would run across an animal and we had to animate that animal as realistic. So it was like our main little group were cartoon characters, but they acted a little bit more human. But when they would meet an animal in the wild, those animals would be true to the actual animal. So it was, a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, because there is an educational aspect to the show as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, we always had to get that right. If we would be told like this is the educational aspect, and we would really try to hit it properly so that whatever the animal did represent what it would look like. And for that, I would take a lot of inspiration just from watching like nature videos and maybe sending clips to animators and say like, try to do it like this kind of thing.
That's something we actually tried a lot to kind of drive across from the very beginning when we were working on stories, was that since, this had an educational aspect, we didn't want it to feel like you're watching a documentary. Instead of just being something fun. And even within us, that kind of became something, a bit of a joke when we started every episode, that we're always like, oh, what are we going to learn this time? Even as adults, because a lot of times you just, we explore certain things about certain animals or things that, you thought you knew, but you end up just learning lots of cool, interesting things that we try to make them, to a fun way, playful way through the characters. So, teach kids in an interesting way.
Very cool. Very cool. And now you mentioned the educational aspect. So this is about kind of the urban critters that you might run across, say squirrels, raccoons, what have you, like.
Yep, it was about animals and I'm sorry, Vesna, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and beavers.
yeah, they would go to swamps and all kinds of things. But it wasn't just animals; it was also weather. We learned about hurricanes and snow and all kinds of like different types of snowflakes and different types of snow. And there's rain episodes, mud, like it's elements of nature as well.
And astronomy.
Pardon me?
And astronomy as well.
Astronomy, yeah. So it
I learned a lot about astronomy.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's why we were able to go for 5 seasons, is because we had such a broad educational,
right,
inspiration out there to pull from. So,
and so
I think also.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Matthew. I was saying it was also like a core idea of trying to like inspire kids to go explore, kind of like Nature Cat and their friends. So a big core element of the show was, like go outside and play in your backyard, right? So a lot of that, you kind of came through different things, like, just like general science and things like that.
Very cool. Very, very cool. All right.
And there's like a lot you can learn just by observing even like a patch of moss in the backyard or just an insect that you come across as well. There's just so much to learn in all those little aspects of nature.
I love the passion that you guys all have for the learning too. Because I feel like that's something that if you have that passion, it comes through for the viewer. So that's really cool that you are also learning along with your audience, which is fun.
Yeah.
Now this one goes out to everyone sort of individually. I just wanted to get an idea, like for working on Nature Cat for each of you, in what way was it similar or different from other projects you've worked on in the past? Big, large, personal projects. Like in what ways did it differ, or were there any kind of universal truths that you experienced on Nature Cat?
All right. In terms of layout, so most projects that I've worked on use raster layers in Photoshop, but Nature Cat required using vector shapes for the base of the layout and like the base of all the major elements. And both raster and vector have pros and cons, but the advantage of using the vector shapes is you can resize elements, like you can blow them up really big for cut-ins, and there's no loss to like the crisp edges and the shapes. And so that was just the major difference I found for Nature Cat versus other projects I've worked on in the past.
Very cool. Julian, the same question goes to you.
I mean, I kind of work, features, TV, commercials, and there's a lot of things that kind of bleed through. So there, that you're kind of working in, very, very similar way. But one thing that I found, especially here at Yowza, is that a lot of times when you work, in a really big project like a feature film, and you have all these people, a lot of times you have very little say in it. And when there's so many people, it's kind of hard to move things in the right direction. Whereas in Nature Cat, this was a fairly small team compared to most other projects, but we knew each other, and the studio, especially working remotely, was also very important that, there's just a little bit more trust also with the client and us. So we were able to actually move fairly quickly, have a very fast turnaround. And then for me, that's kind of the things that I look for the most when I'm taking a project or things like that, is just, who I'm doing it with, because, now, especially working remotely, that ends up being probably the most important thing. Then, then just working with some, really famous director or artist that, it might not be a fun person to be around. So it makes, kind of work not great. So I think in this project, we had a little bit of that. We had a great team, and the studio knew as well. So, we couldn't given a lot of freedom to do a lot of things, how we fit. And also having Lisa, having been a board artist from the first season, I also thought it was very, very useful, at least from my department, since I was looking over storyboards. So that was also a huge help.
Awesome.
Yeah. So for me, this was my first opportunity to direct. So that was a great experience for me. I really relied on everyone around me to kind of teach me my role. I didn't know all of what I was doing, so Vesna would help me a huge amount, and Steven taught me more about animation, and so the whole thing was a huge learning experience for me. I really loved the team that we worked with. I thought we all worked really, really well together and very supportive of one another. And as far as Nature Cat being kind of different than other projects that I've worked on, just as a show, I found that Spiffy, who is the client and the creators of Nature Cat, they just made the whole show and the process so collaborative that it was really, really enjoyable to work on, because we all really did feel like we had a say in what was going to end up on screen. And you weren't just doing a job, you actually were encouraged to give us some ideas, and more often than not we would take them and run with it. And I think that really motivates people. So yeah, it was great.
For sure. Awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, the differences, well, it was a great project to work on, but we had some major challenges going through, and we had to hit some pretty hard deadlines. And everyone from every team, which has never really happened on any other project before, came together, like Lisa was saying, and we did what we had to do. And we had to change sort of our approach of how we were doing it halfway through. And it was just amazing for me to just be able to just work with every department to get what we needed done. And Lisa as the leader was just amazing, because we had to change up sort of halfway through the way we were doing things. And it all worked out, and we hit the final deadline, and it was amazing. And we all produced. I feel really proud of the work that we were able to produce as well.
Very cool.
My turn.
Yes.
I think what sets this show apart from many of the other ones that I've worked on is the crew and the client. Everyone was amazing to work with, a real team, and everyone's very kind with each other. Also, because it's an established show, it was really nice to have all of that laying at your fingertips. What else can I say? The educational aspect of it was a challenge at times, but so that's different than a lot of shows that I've worked on, where you don't have to take into consideration the accuracy of what it is that you're designing or creating. But again, the conversation was always open with everyone, so we could discuss things and find the most economical route to take to get whatever vision accomplished. Also, I have to say, Lisa, you're an amazing director to work with.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that to me is what sets this show apart.
Awesome. Now, almost all of you mentioned the team that you worked with and how it was a tight-knit small team. I was wondering if you could sort of give us an idea of how many people are on your team, and just kind of an overview of Nature Cat's animation pipeline.
How many animators did you have, Stephen? I can't remember.
I think it would vary. I think we went from between 12 and 19. But at one point we took a bunch of animators from other shows to help us hit a deadline, and at that time I think I had like almost 30 animators for like 1 week, and that was pretty crazy. But we have such a talented pool here at Yowza that we were able to hit that one out of the park, because it's hard to come onto a show and just hit the style right away. Spiffy were great clients. They gave us really detailed notes of what they wanted, and they definitely knew what they wanted. So to come onto a show and maybe animate the way you were animating another show, it could be a problem. So we had to communicate and get it going. But yeah, I would say generally I think it was about 15 to 19 animators just under me at the max, other than that 1 week.
Other than that one, of course.
Yeah.
And how would you describe Nature Cat's animation pipeline, just for those interested in kind of how the sausage is made, so to speak. Like, how would you describe your pipeline on NatureCat?
So the way I would say, if I was to break it down in time, I would say to my animators, you would spend about 85% of your time posing. And that's not just doing the main keys. I would be doing keys and breakdowns and flushing out all the posing. 10% in betweening, and then 5% doing lip sync. So what we would do is for the most part, I wouldn't ask this for every single scene, but I would get the opposing pass, and I would try to give my notes. And I was really trying to go. I started animating on paper and with timing charts and things that aren't necessarily done today. But I tried to bring it back to that so that I could look at their posing. To me, there was nothing worse than somebody animating a full scene and then me going in and adjusting their main poses and saying, do it like this. So I really tried to flesh all of that out so that once they had done their posing path, it was just a very structured, from pose to pose, in betweening for the most part. And then lip syncing we had all the mouth shapes, and if you hit them properly, there wasn't a lot of adjusting that needed to be done. So it was primarily get the posing done, and then in between lip sync scenes done, move on to the next.
And just to talk a little bit about the pipeline, because I see somebody's asking about the workflow and the structure. So before it gets to animation, we go through storyboards and using Storyboard Pro. Then it goes through edit with Lisa and Julian. And then once it goes from there, they provide an animatic. And then from there, designs get done in Harmony. We have established pencils that are created in Harmony to design the characters. Once the designs are done, rotation of the characters are done in Harmony, and then mouth kits, blinks, hand kits, feet kits. That all goes to rigging, and then we have a big process through rigging. Once the rigs are finished and approved, then we export TPLs along with TPLs of the BGs. Even though BG's layout is all done in Photoshop, they still get exported out as TPLs, and we have a lot of automation for that. And then we have Steam planners that brings all that information together and set up the scenes for animation. And then it goes to Steven's team, and he does his posing pass and in-betweens. So that's to answer the question about pipeline.
Thank you. I really appreciate the detailed answers. That is super awesome. It's actually impressive to hear how much you can do with a relatively small team. That's very cool, except for that 1 week. When you're making the show, were there any scenes for each of you that stood out to you that you're most proud of having worked on, that you liked? And if so, could you describe it and kind of let us know what your process was behind these scenes?
I love the comic book scenes.
Yeah, they were awesome.
So what are these comic book scenes? Could you describe them for me?
In the storyboard, Lisa, you came up with the idea of the gang, right? What was it called again?
Nature
Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four.
The Nature Task Four, yes.
Yes. And so the characters suddenly became comic book characters, and we did a little bit of a different treatment on the backgrounds where we actually used panels of comic books with the dot tone and just incorporated that comic book feel into the animation. So that took it to a different direction than any of the other episodes that we had done.
Some of the scenes that I was most proud of. Sorry, I was just going to say that some of the scenes that I was most proud of were some of the weather scenes that we had to do, and some the effects, water effects, and hurricane, and oh my goodness, if we were able to somehow show those big elements of nature, but in a way that was simple enough for the animators to use. That was always something that was like my personal challenge was I really wanted to try and find an efficient way to tell the story, right? No matter what it was. Because I don't think that you have to, I don't think every single shot has to be a flashy, dynamic, crazy shot to tell a really good story, right? So some of those shots that we had with weather were really, really difficult, but our animators and our special effects animators were absolutely incredible, and we got the storyboards down so they were really, really simple. So it gave the impression of certain things without having to show every little detail, right? So I think whenever we were able to accomplish that, that made me really, really happy. So.
Cool. I was about to ask Robin, but she just went to good timing.
So as a supervisor, I didn't really work on a lot of sections, but there were some really heavy hitting ones that I had to handle myself. And one of them is in the upcoming special, so I can't really go into a lot of detail, but it's this giant space and it's populated full of pots and vases full of plants and flowers all over. There's at least 50 individual pots of flowers in this space. And so there were several wide shots where just the full length of this room is shown with everything in it. And it's really detailed and really elaborate. And so to match the framing of the storyboard, as well as take into account the entire space, I had to manually populate all the plants into the room just to match the key so that everything looks consistent. And it was a lot of work. And then there was one shot where the horizon line was practically on the floor. So once again, had to manually put all the plants in, but also fix all the perspective of the pots to make it a bit of an upshot. So just putting a lot of work and a lot of TLC into those scenes really makes it spectacular at the end. You just end up seeing all the detail and just how it gives you a sense of just how vast and how amazing the space is. So it was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone enjoys it when they see it, when it comes out.
Definitely. How about you, Julian, Stephen? Any scenes that stand out in your minds that are particularly memorable, or?
I'm a space nerd, so when we did a few episodes about space, those were my favorite. And sometimes it was a good thing and a bad thing, and we had the educational element because as you had some of the cases, things had to be really accurate, but sometimes they're about really random obscure topics that we were going to talk about. So there's times I had to literally watch a documentary before I start, because I remember doing this one episode about the moon and how the moon moves and different kinds of eclipses, and we had to spend quite a lot of time figuring out how that stuff works, just so we can kind of do it properly and without feeling too sciencey or too complicated. Mm-hmm. And also in terms of the story, one of the things that I like about story is not get attached to your ideas or any particular thing. So the way that I saw it more when we were getting boards ready, it was just more it's almost like you're pitching jokes. You just throw a bunch of ideas at the wall, see what lands, see what client likes. So yeah, it was always really interesting what stuff made it through and what stuff didn't make through. But yeah, it's a fun challenge.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm been sitting here thinking what I know. There's a specific scenes that I love. It's all sort of melded together at this point. So, but I agree. I think the space episodes, because I'm a bit of a space nerd, and I did a lot of research of how the astronauts look when they're running on the moon, and I wanted to make sure that we got that look, that it felt like they were on the moon. And it's a fine line between, because you actually look at the astronauts, it's so ridiculous, they're just basically tripping over themselves. So we sort of had this bouncy run cycle of them all running. I that kind of stands out to me because it was really fun to do. And also the superhero posing, when we had them,
yeah,
they would turn into their character and they would all have something. One would, Squeaks was surfing on water. And so that was really fun to make those
Rock Dog.
And what? And the Rock Dog.
Rock Dog.
Yeah. And when he was jamming out on the guitar, I definitely went into that scene and put in my own little touches because I wanted him to really rock out.
That's awesome.
I like Rock Dog.
Yeah.
I love the attachment to the characters. It's great. Now, just to get a little bit more technical, which tools in Harmony did you guys find particularly helpful on your production? Was there anything that you're like, oh wow, this kind of simplified life a tad for our, yeah, kind of more on the technical side of things beyond past the creative a little?
I really like using color scale. Color scale, and what was the other one that we used to create the fly episode? The midge episodes. The I can't remember. I'll remember in a minute.
So from a pre-production standpoint, Storyboard Pro, obviously that's something that I was familiar with before this show, but we kind of took it to another level with NatureCat, which is really the first time I've ever done it, and it was great. We actually used it beyond just storyboards, and we kept using it in edit all the way up to I think we locked the animatic with it. And so right before animation, our editor was great. She was really familiar with Storyboard Pro and was able to work with it. And what that did for me as a director was I was able to get my hands in there with her, and if I said, I just want to play around with the timing here for a few minutes. I didn't want to waste her time. So she would send me the file, and I would just on my own, do a few versions just to see what worked and what I liked. And then I would send her, that clip of scenes, and she would just cut it in. So for us, that really was helpful, and I just think it saved time all around. Plus I was really able to get my vision across to what I wanted. So that was really, really great.
Awesome.
I just remembered I remembered what the tool was to get that midge cloud. We did another educational episode about midges and clouds of midges, and the sprite emitter really came in handy for that, to create that midge cloud. I couldn't remember what it was called, but it's sprite emitter.
Awesome.
For me,
No, I
there's
was going to add that. Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, as you guys can tell now, making animation, and it takes a village to do a cartoon show. There's a lot of people. It's very expensive. So if it wasn't tools, for things like Storyboard Pro, Toon Boom, things like that really lets you control huge amount of information and work, and just kind of keep it organized and streamlined, and this is why software and things that we use are key. And in a way, they're the ones who kind of revived this industry, because I remember it was in the early 2000s that price got too expensive working on paper, but then with this kind of new tools, we found a way to still be true to the traditional art form, but make it in a way that we can do it fast, efficient, and just even software, because our team was people from all over the world. So when we're working on storyboards, Lisa will give me a note through an email, and then I will put it in the Toon file. I will send that file to the artist, in another country, and we were just had this network of people connecting, all working at the same project at the same time. And so the tools and the things that, and especially how much has evolved in the last few years, it has really been a game changer. And then when we don't have to, think so much about the tools, but the tool become really intuitive, then we can just focus on the creative aspect, instead of okay, how can we make this as cool as possible without having, spend so much time just trying to make it look like a 2D show. Right. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you guys have said, of course. And I just add that as I have gone from, I think I worked on Toon Boom #1, when it first came out on a project a long time ago, and to see it just gets better and better every time it upgrades, and it has gone from what kind of used to be like a cutout animation style to now we're working on things and it looks like it's perfectly animated by hand. deformer tools are amazing, and what you can really get away with without having to go in and like kind of draw every frame. And once you mix having that talent as an artist and Toon Boom together, I mean, anything can be done with it. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and we also have that line weight script, so we can also control the line weight of things going from distance to close up, which is very helpful to keep things consistent.
Yeah.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much. And now I've got one more question for the group. This one is more for anyone in the audience looking to break into animation, looking to apply to work on a show, a series like Nature Cat. What advice would you give to a young person just getting started in animation and getting out there, looking for their jobs, trying to get hired on a show like Nature Cat? What kind of advice would you give someone trying to break into animation?
Well, I always tell students when I meet them that just having the basics, really solid drawing skills, and getting out there, networking, going to events like this, for example, or in-person events, introducing yourself. Don't be afraid, because if you stay in your little bubble, no one will ever know that you exist. So you got to get out there, meet people. Once you do get your first job, no matter what it is, work really hard, meet deadlines. That's hugely important. And just be reliable, because that's something that, it's hard to find reliable people sometimes, right?
Present and reliable.
Yeah. So definitely anything like that.
And it's hard now too, everyone working remotely. If you're just getting started, the networking can be a challenge.
Definitely.
So
Yeah, also it also depends what your age is. Like if you're in high school, like I also used to teach at Seneca College, so I review a lot of younger people's portfolios and things like that. And all of us here, we hire teams, so we get a lot of applications. So one thing I would say, if you're young, like high school, middle school, I would just say just draw as much as you can all day. Don't worry about software. Those things keep evolving and changing, and especially now when you have a lot of things like AI. I think the most important thing is how well you can think, and how can you translate things well for your mind to paper. And that skill is something that it's really going to just make you a better artist. So if you're in that age group, I would just say practice as much as you can. Check a sketchbook, go everywhere, draw everything, people, objects, things, make observations. And then if you're a student, what Lisa and Vesna were saying, just try to network, and just also try to, because breaking in is always your toughest part. Getting your first job is always the toughest part. And sometimes you're not ready. But a lot of the times, don't wait for a job for you to keep getting better. If you have a summer off, give yourself a project. Work with your buddy. Let's make a short film. Let's do this. So at least you're always moving. And that's really what the key to breaking in is. Always keep improving no matter what. Even if you don't have a job, keep improving on your own way until it happens. Once you get your first door in an industry, be nice, because I think once you start working, jobs just come from people knowing you, and a lot of times they're like, hey, this person is great to work with. He's he's a good friend, he's a great mentor, whatever it is. People tend to levitate, after that. And then I find that people, in this studio, we can see that a lot now. Is a lot of times you just ended up getting jobs. You don't need a portfolio anymore. Now it's more like a reputation, right? So
yeah, and practice makes perfect. It's like a musician. If you first starting playing the piano or the guitar, you get better the more you do it. So that is.
And learning the basics of like anatomy, that's something that was drilled into us at Sheridan. Was the anatomy is super important, because you have to know everything you look at, everything you plan on animating, you have to imagine a skeleton in there and how is it going to move. So you need to learn the basics of anatomy, and then you can later, once you are familiar with it, you can apply that to other creatures, and even objects. You can kind of imagine what it would look like if it had to move. So,
and the one thing that is also important is understanding the software. So most companies use Harmony to do their 2D, having a basic understanding of Harmony will go a long way.
Awesome.
Yeah. And just, I think too, is just go for it. Like if you're young and you're just out of school, like this is the time for you to just go for it. Like apply everywhere you can, and just go for your dreams, because that's like what it's about, you know. And the three most important things are draw, draw, and draw.
And for layout in VG, especially if you're trying to get into animation, it's not just about drawing a pretty background or a pretty picture. Like as a head of the pipeline for the final product in layout, everything serves animation. Like you have to constantly be thinking about what the departments after you need, and you need to serve that. And I know sometimes individual departments can just fall into the trap of being very insular and like not communicating and not really thinking with a bigger picture. So even if you're a layout artist and not necessarily a supervisor or a director, it really benefits you to just keep the bigger picture in mind and always be thinking about how does your layout serve the characters and their action and the animation as the end product.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the awesome advice and the insights into your pipeline and your workflows. Really appreciate it. And, keep up the awesome work. And
Thanks
thank you
for having us.
Yeah, that was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for having us here.